My name is Elena Hart, and I'm 38. On the night my parents celebrated their Ruby anniversary, the backyard of our old house looked like a scene borrowed from a summer catalog. Strings of warm bulbs, gingham tablecloths clipped against the breeze, paper lanterns shrugging in the live oak branches. I set a red velvet cake on the picnic table, glossy with cream cheese frosting and dotted with sugared cranberries. Neighbors drifted in with casserole dishes and gossip. My father Martin moved among them with a bottle of wine and the careful patience of a man who hates an empty glass. My mother Elaine kept tucking stray napkins into neat stacks the way she tidies when she's nervous. When the toasts ended, my sister cleared her throat. Kayla never needed a microphone. The yard belonged to her the moment she wanted it. "Elena," she said, "you're the anchor." Conversations thin to wire. "You drag us down. We want to live without you." Dad lifted his glass, but not his eyes. Mom studied a clean corner of the tablecloth as if it contained a stain only she could see. A child somewhere laughed at something on a phone. I set the knife beside the untouched cake and tasted metal. I didn't argue. I didn't make a speech or break a plate for emphasis. I smiled the way you do for a camera you never agreed to, thanked an aunt for her potato salad, as if I were hosting the event, and walked through the side gate into the dark. My car smelled like sun-baked vinyl. I drove around the block once to avoid crying in the driveway. By midnight, I was in a budget motel off the highway, the kind with a humming ice machine and curtains that don't quite meet the wall. If you had found me then and asked why I was in a cheap room after a family party, I might have said bad luck. But nothing about the last 5 years was accidental. Each step had been chosen often, in a hurry, always in love. 5 years earlier, I owned a small floral studio downtown called Juniper and Vine. It lived between a cobbler and a vintage camera shop. Every morning, I unlocked the glass door to the smell of cold water and cut stems. Brides trusted me with bouquets that had to say 100 things without a single wrong bloom. Teenagers spent tooth fairy money on bright gerberas for their mothers. I argued with wholesalers about the price of peonies, balanced invoices, missed lunch, and believed that beauty and bills could share a life if I worked hard enough. Then Dad called. His voice had the damp weight of a crawlspace after rain. Mom's heart procedure had rattled their savings. A spring storm peeled shingles off the roof like stickers. The second mortgage bled interest. The house on Juniper Lane, named so sweetly you could almost forgive the groaning pipes, was sliding toward the bank. He didn't ask me for money. He explained, and the silence that followed left a space shaped like an answer. Within a month, I found a buyer signed papers with a pen that didn't feel like mine and sold Juniper and Vine for $142 and $500. I told myself it was a bridge, not goodbye. Every dollar stepped straight into the mortgage current, then into the utilities, then into a repair fund that behaved like a bottomless mouth. I boxed ribbon spools by color and cried only when the new owner wasn't looking. After closing, I took a job at Green Mesa Nursery on the edge of town work that smells like dirt and futures and pays about half what ownership once did. I set up autopays because watching money leave line by line felt like death by receipts. The numbers settled into a rhythm I could recite in my sleep. Electricity, around 300 in summer water, near 100 internet, 80-something insurance, 400 and change. Property taxes arrived in a thick white envelope that felt like a dare. Repairs showed up uninvited, a gurgling water heater, a hairline crack that widened after a hard rain, a fence panel that discovered wind and refused to forget it. Month after month, almost $2,000 disappeared into a house that wasn't mine, a house I kept from drowning because the people inside it were. Dad nodded when I slid receipts across the table, grateful in the way of men who never learned the right vocabulary. Mom squeezed my hand and called me her steady one. The neighbors waved at me as if I were part of the porch itself. I learned the Thursday rattle of the trash truck and the way the front light flickered twice before committing to shine. I told myself this was family, the quiet arithmetic of care. Kayla and I hadn't always been strangers in the same kitchen. In high school, she trailed me around the homecoming float shed hair in a reckless bun, begging to wire greenery with me. Once she cried over a corsage, I rescued with a pin and a prayer. We whispered on the roof during power outages, counted satellites, and drew futures across the dark with our fingers. Somewhere our path forked. She chased freelance design contracts and curated a life that photographed well. I chased due dates, and repair invoices convinced my devotion would be proof of my worth. In the house I kept solvent, Kayla developed a talent for volume. Cabinet doors closed a little too hard when I entered. My coffee mug on the counter became a referendum on respect. "You're a freeloader," she said one morning, and the word bounced once across the tile before lodging. Mom stirred her tea. Dad checked the weather. The AC hummed like a mediator, trying not to choose sides. I called it stress. I bought the detergent she preferred because the scent made her less irritable. I changed the porch bulb before it burned out. I paid the internet a week early so her uploads wouldn't buffer. I took the smaller downstairs bedroom when the roof repair forced us out of ours. I tried to be air-present useful, easy to ignore, but insults drift into corners like dust you promised to handle on Saturday and somehow never reach. You track them room to room. After a while, they live with you. By the night of the party, I was moving around an invisible weight no one else acknowledged, so when Kayla's sentence split the music and the chatter, when my father's silence put a period at the end of it, and my mother's silence added a comma, I felt my hands steady. The cake could wait. The neighbors could refill their cups and make that particular face people make when they pretend they didn't hear something sharp. I was finished auditioning for a role that only paid in exhaustion. I didn't slam a door on my way out. I took my purse, my keys, and the realization that my life had been outsourced to other people's emergencies, and I left before anyone could press a plastic fork into my hand and tell me to smile for a photo. Back at the motel, the air conditioner rattled like a cart with a bad wheel. I set my phone face down and watched headlight stripes crawl across the ceiling. The inventory of my compromises scrolled by vacations, canceled custom orders, declined the ache in my fingers for florist tape that never left. Somewhere between the ice machine cycling and a truck downshifting on the highway, I admitted a truth I had avoided for years. I had mistaken endurance for love. I didn't know yet what changing that would look like. I only knew this the next time someone called me an anchor, I would choose the ship. By morning, the motel's air unit had chattered itself hoarse. I showered under a stuttering stream, folded last night's clothes into my tote, and drove to Green Mesa Nursery before the sun had burned off the wet shine on the asphalt. The gates were already propped, the irrigation timers clicking in their plastic boxes like small patient hearts. I stepped into the propagation shed and breathed the damp, peppery scent of tomato leaves. Work is honest in ways people sometimes aren't. Plants never pretend they didn't need you yesterday. Late night, Bia, my manager, asked, not unkindly. She has a gardener's voice, low, steady, able to soothe a panicked ficus. Family thing, I said, and the phrase felt both too vague and exactly right. She handed me a crate of peat pots. Bottom shelf needs repotting. And Elena, if you need a day, take it. I need this? I said, meaning the soil under my nails, the tiny obligations that come with measurable progress. She nodded and left me to the constant mercy of roots. By lunch, my phone had twice vibrated with unknown numbers, and once with a cheerful spam about extended warranties. I turned it face down on the workbench and let a ladybug explore the ridge of my wrist. When the bell over the front gate chimed, I looked up to find Mira on the path, sun catching in the gold hoop at her ear. We'd met in a community college poetry class 15 years ago and never finished arguing about metaphor. "You look like you slept on gravel," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like cardamom and printer ink. Mira runs a small print shop near campus, the kind of place where zines grow like mushrooms after rain. Close, I said, industrial carpet. She hooked an arm through mine. Break, now. We took our sandwiches to the back lot, where the shade cloth cast everything in a soft underwater light. I told her the short version, the toast that wasn't Kayla's sentence, pitched like a dart, the quiet withdrawal that might as well have been applause. When I reached the motel, my throat went dry the way it does when a story arrives at its cliff and peers over. "Come stay with us," she said immediately. "The office/guest room has a door that actually shuts. Jonah won't mind. He's been waiting to foist that electric kettle on someone anyway." "I'll just be a few days," I said, which was not a plan so much as a hope. "Until I think. Thinking is easier when you're not counting ceiling stains," she said. "Text me when you get off. We'll order Thai." That evening, I followed her battered hatchback to a small Craftsman in Rosedale, where Rosemary nibbled the edge of the driveway, and a porch swing kept the kind of secrets only wooden things can. Inside, the place hummed with the friendly clutter of people who make things for a living. Test prints clipped to a line, misfit mugs, a cat named Pixel, who disapproved of all new policies. Jonah handed me a clean towel and a set of keys as if I were expected and always had been. We ate on the floor because the table was buried under wedding invites for a couple who had chosen oranges as a theme and ambitiously as a font color. After, Jonah leaned his shoulders against the sofa and said, "You know our neighbor, Mrs. Calder, the retired librarian with the lemon tree, who makes those lemon bars that taste like summer tuition, yes. She has a brother, Art, who co-signed on his son's everything. Car, apartment, temporary help." Jonah made careful quotation marks and let his fingers drop. When the son called him controlling for asking where the money went, Art unplugged. No more checks, no more emergencies. He said, "I can either bankroll a sinkhole or teach a man about gravity." Took 3 months, but the kid got 2 jobs, cut his expenses, survived. Art kept saying, "Consequences teach faster than lectures." Mira squeezed my knee. "You've been delivering lectures with cash for 5 years, and writing yourself into the smallest corner of the story," Jonah added. His voice wasn't cruel. It was the voice you use to warn someone they're about to step into a hole. I slept in their office that night, under a poster of a 1970s botanical print of nasturtiums. At 2 a.m, I woke to Pixel headbutting my elbow, as if to correct the distribution of affection. I lay still and let the ceiling fan stir the room into slow circles. The thought that had followed me from the motel returned sharper. Now endurance is not the same thing as love. My hand drifted toward my tote, found my laptop I feel, and pulled it into the pool of light from the desk lamp. The spreadsheet opened with a click, that familiar grid of ordered panic. Autopay dots glowed in their green reassurance. I scrolled until the rows felt like a rosary. Lone Star Electric Cooperative City. Utilities Water. Lone Stream Internet Redwood. Mutual Insurance County. Tax Office. The numbers beside them were the song I knew by heart. $3,004, $82, $440, whatever the tax bill wanted to be when it woke up mean. I hovered over the first switch. My chest tightened in what I recognized as old training. The reflex to keep others comfortable, even if it meant drowning in a warm bath. I thought about Kayla's pronouncement, about my father's obedient swallow of wine, about my mother's sudden interest in imaginary stains. I thought about every receipt I had slid across our kitchen table, only to have it filed under the natural order of things. Then I clicked. Green became gray. The world didn't tilt. A truck rumbled down the street. Pixel sneezed. I clicked again, and again. I opened my email and sent confirmations to an account I never checked, a little mausoleum for decisions. The tax office would take manual payments only. I closed the browser tab and let the message sit like a stone. When I finally shut the laptop, the room felt a degree brighter. Not relief exactly, more like the moment after a tourniquet is removed and your limb pulses with insulted blood. My heartbeat slowed. I slept. The first call came mid-morning as I was unloading a pallet of mulch. Kayla. I wiped at my hands on my jeans and answered because avoiding a storm doesn't change the weather. "What did you do?" she demanded, skipping greeting like it was a toll she refused to pay. "The Wi-Fi is out and I have 3 client files due, and Mom says the power bill is showing pending termination." "This is not funny." I turned off autopay, I said. "I won't be covering the house anymore." "You can't be serious," she said, and the "you" wasn't a person, so much as a set of functions. "You know Dad needs the internet for his listings. You know I work from home. I know you told me I was an anchor." I said steady. "I'm letting go." She gave a short, incredulous laugh that banged into a wall and fell. "You're unbelievable. No one wants you here and you make it harder from over there. Grow up." She hung up before I could decide whether to say goodbye. The second call came that night. Mom. Her voice wore a politeness that had always made bank tellers call her ma'am twice. "Sweetheart," she began, and I saw her twisting the hem of a dish towel, a prop she's used since before I noticed. "It seems we've run into some confusion. Your father has been distracted with jobs and the hospital bills were more than we anticipated, and Kayla's projects." "Well, you know how freelancing goes." "I do." I said, thinking of the invoices I'd chased for custom bouquets, of how humiliation and late payment often shared a stamp. Could you put the payments back just for a little while, until things even out? She added carefully. A family pulled in different directions can come apart. I was pulled, I said quietly. For years. I asked for help with the pulling and got told I was the weight. Silence from her end, then you know your sister doesn't think before she speaks. She thinks after I said. She watched me clean up and liked how it looked. Mom exhaled a gentle failure. Please, Elena. I can't, I said, and before courage had time to loosen, I added, I won't. For a few days, the house on Juniper Lane existed only as a fixed point on the map I refused to zoom. I threw myself into work. I taught a boy how to tease root-bound marigolds into attention. I showed a woman how to stake a lanky tomato and how not to apologize for its desire to reach. When customers thanked me, I nodded and tried not to cry at the novelty of being useful and seen in the same minute. On the fourth day, Sharon Pike, who lives across from my parents and owns both a Yippie Terrier and an Olympic-level curiosity, texted me a photo. The front lawn, tall enough to wave trash bins, tilted, like derailed intentions, a pale envelope flattened against the porch by the doormat. Everything okay over there, she wrote. Martin hasn't borrowed my hedge trimmer in a week. I typed 3 false replies before sending 1 true one. I'm not sure, Sharon. Hope you're well. That evening, Mira came home with a bag of groceries and a print job that smelled of fresh ink. She set both down and studied my face. How bad? Official-looking envelopes are visiting, I said. The lawn is auditioning for a prairie. She handed me a jar of olives. Grief can look like relief's awkward cousin, she said. You can feel both. We ate on the porch. Jonah told a story about a couple who asked for their save the dates to be printed in lemonade, which turned out to mean yellow so pale you could read it only in good faith. For an hour, I let their voices lay a bridge over the part of me that wanted to grab my checkbook and sprint. The next week performed its own slow choreography. Kayla posted a vague complaint about service providers who ruin lives, then deleted it. Dad left a voicemail that was mostly the sound of him preparing to speak. Mom called twice and said nothing new with better phrasing. The envelope on the porch bred siblings. Sharon texted me a second photo, then a third. In the last one, the notices had been moved inside. When the certified letter arrived, Sharon sent me a close-up of the green card and the bank's logo. My stomach nodded the deliberate nod of someone looping a rope around a trunk. I watched the message until my phone dimmed and went black. Then I turned it over and looked at the grain of the table at the tiny nick where someone once set down a screwdriver too hard. You can love a house and still refuse to be buried in it. That night, Mira scrolled through rentals on her tablet and asked, You want to look? Just to see what choosing might resemble. I'm not planning to stay forever, I said, then heard the tiredness in the word plan. Forever is a bully, she said. We're only asking about next. We looked. Brick apartments with stern HOA rules. A converted garage with a skylight the size of a promise. A condo with a balcony that pretended to be a deck. I felt something in me tilt toward a future that wasn't arranged around a roof leak. On day 12, Mom left a message that didn't request. It confessed. I called the bank. She said voice sanded down to the boards. They said words, default acceleration, reinstatement, like objects thrown across a room. Your father is trying. Your sister is trying. I should have stopped her when she spoke to you like that. I didn't. I thought silence would keep the peace. A swallow. It did not. I saved the voicemail and didn't answer. I wrote the words oxygen mask on a sticky note and stuck it to my wallet. I bought a cheap secondhand suitcase because borrowing luggage from a life I might not return to felt like tempting old gravity. When guilt came, a faithful dog a shadow at noon, I let it sit by my chair and didn't feed it. On the 14th day, as the heat leaned its full weight on the city, a courier slipped a notice under my parents' door that began helpfully and without metaphor. Notice of intent to foreclose. Sharon sent me a blurry photo and 3 question marks. I closed my eyes and could see the paper without seeing it, the date, the reference number, the promise of a timeline that would not slow for tears. I didn't drive over. I didn't call the bank or a lawyer or the version of myself who used to sprint toward fire with a watering can. I sat on Mira's porch with a glass of water and my bare feet on the warm wood and felt the world adjust to the fact that I was not going to fix it. When the sun slid down the block and the cicadas tuned their fists of sound, I finally exhaled. There is a quiet that arrives after decision, even a hard one. It doesn't make you happy. It makes you real. Somewhere not far from here, a door had closed with a legal click that would carry us all toward a courtroom. I could feel the pull of it already, a tide coming in whether or not we had built a sand wall. I went inside, opened my laptop, and began a list. Not of payments, of choices. Where to live, how to work, what to love on purpose. The anchor was gone. The ship was moving. And ahead, somewhere between shame and relief, a judge waited with a calendar and a file with my family's name on it. The certified letter didn't care about anybody's feelings. It announced a timetable, dates, steps, a clock wound tight. Notice of intent to foreclose, then if no miracle sale set. It read like a train schedule you can't outrun. I took a photo of the page not to send to anyone, but to convince myself reality had chosen ink. In the days that followed, the neighborhood chorus found its notes. Sharon Pike texted updates dressed as questions. Did your dad switch lawn guys? Your mom wasn't at Thursday Bunko. The mail carrier knocked twice. I answered sparingly, a weather report written by someone who doesn't control the clouds. At Green Mesa, I hid in work that could be done well or badly. Repotting basil starts coaxing a battered fiddle leaf to forgive its owner. The tasks steadied me. I taught a teen how to water by listening to soil. I didn't say I'm learning that with people you can't count on the same physics. On a humid afternoon, Mom came to the nursery. She rarely visited. She says the smell of fertilizer makes her think of county fairs, which make her think of bees, which make her think of stings. She looks smaller, as if the week had borrowed inches from her. She stood between wind chimes, their metallic vowels spelling a language that promised calm and delivered weather. Elena, she said, Ari, and the careful felt like a railing between us. Can we talk? We sat on the bench near the citrus. She folded her hands as if they were a letter she might be asked to show. I told your sister to apologize, she began. That's a new verb, I said. I didn't mean it to sting. It did anyway. She flinched. I should have said something that night. I knew it the second the words left her mouth. I thought quiet would keep the celebration afloat. She shook her head. Quiet is a coward I've mistaken for peace my whole life. The admission was so clean it left no place for triumph. I'm sorry you're in this, I said. It was the warmest sentence I could make without lighting myself on fire. Her eyes landed on a Meyer lemon, bright unbothered, already imagining marmalade. Your father is furious at the bank at the World. He says he never needed rescuing, that he would have figured it out. She hesitated. He's a proud man. Pride is heavy when the water rises. I thought of Dad the way he used to be when I was small, shoulder-hoisting me to pick pecans, counting lightning beats, inventing stories for the old van when it refused to start. Then I saw him at the anniversary table, meeting his glass instead of my eyes. Both could be true. Memories aren't erasers. I'm not coming back with a check, Mom, I said softly. I know, she whispered. I didn't come to ask. I came to say I see it now. What you did. What it cost. She looked at her hands. If there is a way through this that doesn't carry you like a pack horse, I want that way. I nodded once, a hinge creaking. There's a hearing, I said. You'll need to be there. She blinked. Will you? I don't know, I lied. That night, I lay on Mira and Jonah's couch and read the letter again, then the packet that followed it, terms that sounded like furniture in a house I didn't live in, reinstatement cure amount trustee. I wasn't a party to the case. I was a footnote who had accidentally financed a preface. But the story had my name in it whether I bought a ticket or not. When the court date arrived in a week, sealed by heat advisories, I dressed like a person who would not be mistaken for anyone else. Black slacks, white shirt, a small gold necklace I kept forgetting I owned. I tucked my folder into my tote, the one with juniper and vine embossed faintly on the leather, because I could never bring myself to replace it, and drove downtown early enough to find parking without prayer. The county courthouse held the sort of air that has watched people lie to themselves for 100 years. Wood benches' flags seal the quiet shuffle of those who are learning that paper moves slower and faster than hearts. A clerk called names in a voice meant to float and not stick. I sat in the back, not hiding, not announcing. The bank's counsel was a woman in navy whose hair did not know wind. A man with a lapel pin introduced himself as the trustee and seemed mostly tired. My parents arrived with Kayla between them, her shoulders pitched forward as if she could outrun the echo of her own footsteps. Dad's jaw was the locked drawer that used to hold Christmas presents. Mom held a file folder like an apology. Kayla's phone hovered in her hand, dark screen dying planet. When Mom saw me, she startled, then smoothed her face into the expression she uses on church ladies and new neighbors. Dad's eyes found me slid past returned, as if I were a word he did not recognize, but suspected he might dislike. Kayla froze. For a second, I saw the kid on the roof stringing fairy lights with me, both of us laughing when we realized we'd forgotten an extension cord. Then she looked at the bank's attorney and flinched as though light had become interrogation. Next matter on the docket, the bailiff said. The Bank of Guadalupe versus Martin and Elaine Hart. For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. My family's name sounded different in that room, as if it needed a coat. We stood because everyone did. Judge Ramirez was the kind of orderly presence that makes a person want to confess to things they haven't done just to keep the symmetry of the day. Counsel spoke. Numbers were recited like scripture, without prayer. Missed payments, accrued interest fees that sound small until they learn to count. The judge asked questions that had answers you could staple to. Have the defendant sought a modification? Any payments made since the notice, proof paper rustled. My parents' new attorney, a man who seemed to wear his tie as a dare, offered a handful of maybes and one we're trying. Ma'am, Judge Ramirez said to my mother, is there anything you'd like to say that your counsel has not? Mom swallowed eyes on the bench. We fell behind, she said. We thought we could catch up. We were wrong. The judge turned to my father. We're not quitters, Dad said, which was both true and not an answer. And Miss Hart? The judge glanced at Kayla. Kayla lifted her chin, a degree brave by half measures. I freelance, she said to the microphone as if correcting a rumor. Our internet was there were complications. The judge nodded in the neutral way of people who have heard every version of it wasn't supposed to go like this. The bank has met the statutory requirements, she said. Unless you bring the account current or reach an agreement, the sale will proceed as noticed. It could have ended there, gavel echo paperwork assembling itself into fate. The room began to stir with the collective impulse to leave before anyone cried. My fingers found the edge of my folder and pressed. I rose. Your Honor, I said, and my voice surprised me by belonging to me. The judge looked toward the back. Ma'am, I'm not a party, I said, but I'm their daughter. I have information that may explain how we arrived here, if it pleases the court. The phrase felt like borrowed clothing, but it fit well enough. Counsel for the bank raised no objection. Counsel for my parents raised his eyebrows, and then both hands empty. The judge exhaled the kind of breath that says I will allow one more thing if it makes the day make sense. Briefly, she said, I walked to the clerk and set my folder down. Inside were bank statements, auto-pay confirmations, a simple spreadsheet printed in black and white because drama is not in the fonts. 5 years of payments, highlighting themselves in a grid Lone Star Electric City Utilities Lone Stream Redwood Mutual County tax when it had thrown a fit. I had written dates in the margins next to life events. Not to accuse, but to create a spine, Mom's surgery roof repair, Kayla's car, Dad's listings, my shop sold. This is not to stop the foreclosure, I said, turning to face the bench and the room that held my past like a casserole dish. It's to correct the record we tell ourselves when we leave here. For 5 years, I covered the house utilities repairs taxes. I sold my business to do it. I set up automatic payments because I was tired of watching need arrive like weather. When my sister told me I was an anchor, I shut them off. That is why the notices came fast, not because the bank is cruel, not because the universe lost track, but because one person stopped paying for 3. Silence pooled. You could have planted something in it, and the roots would have taken. Kayla made a sound like a swallowed word. My father's face changed not into apology, but into recognition, which is its own hard gift. My mother put a hand over her mouth like a shutter closing against weather that had already entered the house. The judge scanned the top page, then one middle page, as if testing the paper for sincerity. These aren't exhibits to this proceeding, she said gently. But they are informative. She lifted her gaze to my parents, then to me. Whatever happens with the property, it would be wise for this family to locate the truth and stand near it. I nodded. I hadn't expected rescue only light. The judge turned back to the practical world where dates matter more than feelings. Sale date remains, she said, Counsel, you'll submit your orders." We were dismissed. People rose with the relief of the inevitably sad. In the aisle, Dad moved toward me, and for an instant I thought he might hug me or hit me with a sentence I couldn't dodge. He stopped a foot away, breath and past and stubbornness standing in a small triangle. "You didn't have to do that," he said. It wasn't clear which that he meant. "I know," I said. "I didn't have to do any of it." His jaw worked. "You made us look visible," I offered. He flinched. Old habits wanted me to soften it to pack it in tissue. I didn't. "I'm done being the receipt nobody reads." Kayla hovered behind him, mascara brave. "You could have just called me," she said brittle. "We didn't need a show." "I called you by paying your bills for half a decade," I said. "You put me on mute." Security didn't have to step in. Nobody raised a hand. But a bailiff drifted nearer like a lifeguard deciding whether a ripple requires a whistle. Mom stood apart, the folder clasped to her chest, tears sliding down like something the body does when it realizes it can't fix the weather. Outside, the Texas heat greeted us without choosing sides. The courthouse steps baked every shoe into the same humility. A reporter hovered across the street in case a high-profile case produced a quote. We were blessedly not interesting. Jonah's car idled by the curb. He had texted me here the moment the judge thanked us all and reminded us to be decent to the clerks. "You okay?" he asked when I slid in. "No," I said. "Then yes." Both rang true in alternating lines. We drove without the radio. The city moved the way it always does when it has watched humans fail and forgive and forget all in the same block. At Mira's, she'd stocked the fridge with things that didn't demand a recipe. I drank water like someone recently welcomed back to shore. That evening, I walked alone following a loop of the streets that smell like sprinkler water and backyard dinners. I passed a girl selling lemonade that was mostly enthusiasm and ice. A dad in socks watered a lawn with a hose as if he were painting it greener. On a corner, a for sale sign leaned humble as a confession. My phone chimed. Sharon again. "Heard there was a hearing." "You holding up?" I typed. "Yes, there will be a sale." She sent a heart, then a lemon, then unexpectedly a small bouquet emoji. Back on the porch, I replayed the judge's sentence, "Locate the truth and stand near it." It wasn't absolution. It was instruction. In my lap, the juniper and vine tote looked tired and loyal. I rested my hand on the embossed letters until the urge to apologize to the bag passed. Later, Mom called. I let it go to voicemail because I needed to hear the message at a distance. "I'm proud of you," she said, voice ragged but clear. "Not because you paid, because you told the truth where it could be heard. I'm sorry I asked you to be quiet so many times." She drew a breath that sounded like she'd set something down. "I don't know what happens next. I only know you're not the one who should fix it." I saved the message. Then I opened my laptop and looked at the rentals Mira had starred small places with good light, a north-facing window for plants, a kitchen counter not yet nicked by other people's arguments. I made a list of what a life requires when you build it on purpose. A bed that fits one person perfectly, a kettle that boils quickly, a table large enough for friends and honesty. I added because I am myself a vase. 2 days after the hearing, the trustee's sale notice appeared on the county website cold as a recipe. First Tuesday next month, between 10 and 4 on the courthouse steps. If Part 2 had been the choice, Part 3 was the consequence written down. The ship had left the harbor. The harbor would be sold to the highest bidder. Standing on Mira's porch, I felt fear and relief arguing softly under my ribs, both of them for once using their inside voices. When I went to bed, I set my phone face down and my decisions face up. Tomorrow, I would tour a condo with a narrow balcony and a view of roofs like scale armor. I would return the library book I had renewed twice because I didn't want to finish the story. I would buy flowers for myself, something ordinary and cheerful like zinnias, because I wanted color that had not been asked to explain itself. The first Tuesday came hot and precise, the kind of Texas morning that makes every metal surface a warning. I woke before the cicadas found their gear and brewed tea in Mira's loud kettle. On the counter, my list from the night before waited to tour the condo at noon. Return the library book, buy flowers for myself. I added one more line in small refusing letters, "Courthouse steps if you can stand it." I drove downtown early and circled the square once the way you circle a pool before deciding whether you'll jump. At a corner florist, I bought a fistful of Zinnia's stubborn little suns that don't ask for permission to be bright and left them on Mira's passenger seat like a promise I meant to keep. Then I crossed to the courthouse and stood at the edge of the shade where strangers become a temporary congregation. Trustee sales are punctual, the way clocks are indifferent. A man with a binder read parcel descriptions that sounded like coordinates to a place you can't return to lot. 12 Block 3, Juniper Lane, subdivision. People nodded and bid as if this were a market and not a grief. When our address arrived, my breath tripped. Opening bid, a hand, another, a number I recognized from old tax statements and from the heavy arithmetic of saving. Sold. The word wasn't cruel, it was simply final. Across the courtyard, Mom stood with her folder pressed to her chest as if it were the last warm thing in the world. Dad kept his arms folded, jaw set, on the stubbornness that had built and broken so much. Kayla wore sunglasses despite the patch of shade the lenses reflecting a scene she couldn't edit. None of us waved. We didn't look away either. The gavel was a click of a pen. Paper moved toward the new owner. The house on Juniper Lane joined other addresses in a ledger that does not accept adjectives. I didn't wait to see the buyer shake hands. I texted Sharon Pike 2 words. It's done, and walked to my car feeling something detach in me, a tendon that had been clenched for years going slack and tender. Grief and relief took turns at the wheel. I let them. At noon, I toured a north-facing condo with a narrow balcony and a view of roofs that overlapped like shingles on an animal. The place smelled faintly of old lemons and new paint. The bedroom fit a bed, and the truth, which is all I wanted. The kitchen counter had a nick shaped like a comma, a reminder that life does not end at declarative sentences. The agent talked about HOA fees and parking permits. I asked about light. We signed papers the next day. I held the keys in my palm like a smooth stone. Moving took 2 carloads, and the friends who show up with pizza and power strips. Jonah carried my thrifted armchair. Mira arranged my mugs on a shelf as if they were an argument she meant to win. Pixel inspected every corner and decided grudgingly to approve of my rug. I put the nasturtium poster above the desk and the zinnias on the windowsill where the light made them louder. That first night in my own bed, the quiet did not accuse me. It introduced itself. Work changed not the job, but the way I stood inside it. At Green Mesa, I proposed a Saturday class called Bouquets for the Rest of Us, where people could learn to make something kind out of grocery store stems. B said, print a flyer, and I did on Mira's soft cotton paper that makes ink behave. The first class filled with people who'd never wired a boutonniere and didn't need to. We laughed when the eucalyptus went its own way. We let it. I sent them home with jars that looked like small arguments for beauty. In the evenings, I sketched a plan that wasn't a shop, but wasn't not one. Either a pop-up counter at Mira's print studio where you could order a 3-stem bouquet with your invitations, a seasonal surprise for your table, a ribboned apology you'd thought about first. I called the idea nasturtium and thread because those flowers are edible and stubborn, and stories need something to hold them. The plan fit on 1 page. It fit in my life. A week after the sale, Mom asked to meet for coffee in a quiet place with poor Wi-Fi. We chose a cafe that roasts its own seriousness. She arrived in a blue blouse I recognized from Easter's and careful conversations. We sat by the window and didn't pretend to discuss weather. I went by the house she said stirring tea she would never sweeten. They've already started on the lawn. It looks better than it did in years. She smiled the small, embarrassed smile of someone who has been both helped and humbled. A strange relief to know the yard can be green without us. We let that sit. Then she took a breath I recognized as the preface to honesty. I asked for your silence so often, she said. At church, at the dinner table, at that party. I told myself I was protecting peace. I was protecting comfort, mostly mine. I didn't rush to lighten it. Truth deserves its own chair. Thank you for saying it, I told her. I can't come back to the role I had. I know. She folded and unfolded her napkin. I won't ask. I would like to learn you again without asking you to carry me. She looked up, eyes clearer than they'd been in months. I love you. That's not a request. I love you, I said. That's not a contract. We didn't solve Kayla. We didn't try. Later that night, Kayla sent a text a paragraph of almost she'd taken a part-time job at a design firm. She was working on herself. She was sorry for the tone. I typed, thank you, and I need space and didn't add a syllabus. Boundaries aren't punishments. They're paths. In my new place, I learned the sounds that would belong to me. The neighbor's laugh that lifts late, the elevator's punctual mercy, the way the balcony rails cool quick after dusk. On Sundays, I took long walks through streets that weren't loaded with memory. I bought peaches at the farmer's market and let the juice choose my shirt. I returned the library book and checked out another on perennials that thrive in heat and neglect. I left a small vase on my table so there would always be room for color. Sometimes, when a day was too quiet, I drove past Juniper Lane and didn't turn in. The house wore new trim and a practical mailbox. A woman watered the flower bed in shorts and competence. She waved at nobody in particular. I rolled past and felt only the ache you get when a healed muscle remembers the shape of its old injury. It didn't ask me to stop. On a warm evening that felt like a door standing open, I sat on my balcony with a glass of water and the zinnias from that morning's market. The city threw its small lights at the sky like children practicing. I thought about Judge Ramirez and her sentence that had become a mantra, locate the truth and stand near it. I had. It wasn't heroic, it was maintenance. Somewhere families were making toasts that would break or hold. Somewhere a woman was deciding whether endurance counted as love. I wanted to tell her what the nasturtiums had taught me. Roots can be shallow and still hold. Boldness can be edible. You're allowed to choose a bright thing because you want it. Down below, a couple argued gently about where to put a planter. Pixel pressed his face to my screen like a disgruntled moon. Inside, the kettle clicked off. I set the flowers in their vase and straightened the stems until they stood the way they wanted. For the first time in years, I wasn't the anchor or the storm. I was a woman with a small balcony, a clear story, and a ship that finally knew where it was going. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.